Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our presentation of Burnside Unbound, where we bring our author events to you. Tonight, we are excited to have the winner of the 2019 Penguin Literary Prize, Imbi Neeme. Welcome, Imbi.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you to all of our attendees zooming in tonight to meet and hear about Imbi's newly launched novel, The Spill. To begin this author talk tonight, Imbi will speak for approximately 15 minutes about her writing journey, and then I will ask Imbi questions on your behalf. So during the webinar, please feel free to type in any questions you have for Imbi into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I'll ask Imbi your questions. So sit back, relax, grab your wine or a cup of tea, and enjoy this episode of Burnside Unbound. And now I'll hand over to Imbi to tell us a little bit about her writing journey.
Thanks, Kate. Hi, everybody. I'm going to just impress everybody with my technical wizardry by sharing my screen. Let's hope this actually works. Yes, hello. Hello, screen. Oh, but gone too fast. See, I spoke too soon. So my name is Imbi Neeme, and before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I'm standing on at the moment. It's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I want to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I particularly want to do this because storytelling has always been such a big part of their lives on this land where I now live, where I write, and where I tell my own stories. I also want to acknowledge that today is my name day in Estonia. It's the Imbi Day, and there is actually another Imbi part of this Zoom call. So I'm just really excited about that. And I want to say, hi Imbi and happy Imbi Day. It's actually very exciting to meet another Imbi. So yeah, if you've lived with a name like Imbi, you wouldn't understand how exciting that is. So I'm giving this particular presentation a lot. So, and I have this kind of, I hate repeating myself again and again, but I also have to tell the truth, except for one slide. One slide is a bold, outright lie. And at the end of the presentation, we'll be asking you which slide held the fake news. So here we go. The Spill is actually not my first novel. People are describing it as a debut, but it's not my first. I actually was first published in 1976 when I was 5 years old in the annual school magazine. I remember so clearly how proud I felt and this incredible sense of achievement and satisfaction. And a couple of years later, I sort of looked back and realized it wasn't like a book that I'd written, like I felt like I'd written a book. It was just a single sentence. And that sentence was this. I'll do a reading now, shall I? The funny planet. One day a man went to a planet and explored it, and a rocket came and a funny turkey came out and asked if he would join in a party in his rocket. Imbi Neeme, year one. I really loved finding this. The school sent me a copy and because I was delighted to find out it wasn't an alien that came out of the rocket ship, which is how I had remembered it, but actually a turkey, and not just a turkey, but a turkey with a capital T. So it's like the whole country came out. Anyway, so that was how I began. And then, unfortunately, I entered the teenage years where I journaled miserably for maybe 8 years. This photo is my actual journals, the ones that remain. Luckily, some were destroyed or lost, so we can all rest easy at night, particularly me. And then I did, you know, the writerly rite of passage where I wrote an earnest and probably quite terrible novella when I was living in Japan by myself, teaching English right after university. I actually wrote on something exactly like this, and I enjoyed Googling these images because I'm like, wow, that's more house brick than it is actually computer. It's quite impressive. The novel was highly derivative. I thought I was the Australian Jeanette Winterson with some sort of vague undertones of Kurt Vonnegut and Margaret Atwood and Virginia Andrews, who wrote the Flowers in the Attic series. But I remember my dad agreed after some badgering to read my book, and I remember him saying that I had found my bliss, and that really kind of stuck with me. And I thought, I'm on my way, except I entered my own personal dark ages. Between the ages of 25 and 37, I wrote virtually nothing. I did a couple of screenwriting courses, but I started a career, I had 3 children, I also got married, but I did 0 writing. But still, during that time, I identified as a writer, and that's half the job, right? Yeah. And then after a few too many long-winded posts on Facebook, a friend of mine said, have you ever thought about starting a blog? And after I had Googled, what is a blog? I started Not Drowning Mothering, which was a blog that I wrote for 4 or 5 years, pretty much five posts a week, sharing my life as a stay-at-home mum. You know, I wrote something like 270,000 words in that time, with sort of small children dangling off me like Christmas ornaments. But, you know, I would be getting up at 5, I'd be writing really hard, and then I would be editing and pressing publish while the kids were awake, and while I was getting them ready for school and kindergarten. And then I would start thinking about next day's post. And so it was really good training for me, because I kind of developed this really sort of, this great muscle that allows me to write in very short, sharp bursts, and something that I've carried with me to this day. So then I also had kind of like other sort of strings to my bow. For example, I was an Olsen twin in West Hollywood for 6 months, I think, maybe 7. A lot of parties, good times. I started my own pajama brand during that time. And then I decided to turn my hand to long form fiction and playing the long game, where I really, my heart was not in the blog, my heart was in writing a novel. I wanted to write a novel. And in 2013, in this restaurant in Dublin, where I was visiting with my partner, and there's actually my son to the left about to photobomb, and I wrote this first paragraph of my first manuscript. Then took me another year before I wrote the second paragraph of my first manuscript, but we'll just forgive me that. This photo was actually taken in, not when I just written the first paragraph, because that'd be a bit weird, like write a paragraph and then go and pose for a photo, but it's actually taken 5 years later, and 3 manuscripts, including the first draft of The Spill. And I'm standing there, I'm still 9 months away from winning the Penguin Literary Prize. I hadn't even entered at that point. So I guess you're wondering, how did I get from this one paragraph to winning the Penguin Literary Prize? This is the answer. My submission spreadsheet, isn't it a beautiful thing? This actually isn't the full spreadsheet, it only shows about half of it. But basically, whenever I submitted anything, whether it was to a prize or a competition or a publisher or an agent, I would log it in here, and you know, so I could keep track of when shortlists were announced or winners were announced. If you see that really long grey column on the left with the occasional little burst of yellow and a couple of green, that is that's the results one, and the grey represents where I was unsuccessful. The yellow is where I was listed, and the green is where I was actually successful, where I might have won something. It was mostly short story prizes. So I always try and tell people, you know, like, oh, you won the Penguin Literary Prize. I'm like, yeah, but behind that is like 100 disappointments and rejections. So I just feel like that's worth remembering. But then I did win the Penguin Literary Prize, lucky me. So people often ask me, you know, what were you doing when you found out that you won? Well, it was a Sunday afternoon. And look, anyone who has ever submitted for any of these things knows that no email of any consequence comes on a Sunday. The minute 5 o'clock hits on a Monday, you enter this kind of black spot where, you know, it's just marketing emails and probably emails from your mother, but nothing that's going to say that you've won the, you know, something like the Penguin Literary Prize, or so I thought. So I was like idly checking my email, my stepdaughter was explaining the plot of The Shining to her younger sister, and I saw the email from Meredith Curnow, who's my publisher now at Penguin, and it didn't even connect that that was the Meredith Curnow from writing to me about the Penguin Literary Prize. And so I sort of opened it without thinking, and then I read her coy little thing, which was like, dear Imbi, what do you think about winning the Penguin Literary Prize? And I gasped so loudly. I was just like, that my oldest stepdaughter thought that she just spoilt the ending of The Shining for me, but yeah, she hadn't. And, you know, the answer to Meredith's question was like, I feel really, really good about winning the Penguin Literary Prize, like really good. So we instantly dropped all of our plans for that day, which probably involved like going to the supermarket and doing really boring things. We went out to lunch to celebrate. And at one point I went into the bathroom and I saw my reflection for the first time. And I thought, I have to capture this feeling. And there I am. This is the selfie I took on the day that I won the Penguin Literary Prize. Now imagine that feeling and trying to bottle that feeling in, being told you couldn't tell anyone for like 2 weeks. Like, it was excruciating. I sat on that feeling. I went to work, I did my job, but all the time I was feeling like that. So then on the 17th of March, in 2019, I flew to Adelaide. I remember getting the itinerary. It's in the corner, it said author on tour. And that was like my first taste of going, ooh, I'm an author. I flew to Adelaide to the Leading Edge Books Conference to receive the prize. As I walked into the event with Meredith, she turned to me and said, oh, so do you want to say a few words? And I was like, what? No one told me I had to make a speech, because as a writer, I like to write everything first. I'm not good at kind of just, you know, talking off the cuff. I need to start with, you know, kind of what I want to say. But then when I saw the room, it was full of like independent booksellers, and there was one ex-prime minister, fun fact. I thought, this is where it begins. This is where my author, my capital A author journey begins. And I've got to kind of step up to this. So I said, yes, no, I will say a few words. And when the time came, I stood up at the lectern and I babbled pretty much like I'm babbling now, like, and then I ended the whole thing by waving at the room going, it's nice to meet you all, like that, like exactly that tone. And then blushed for like hours later thinking, oh my God, like I sounded like, you know, PTA mum wins literary prize, but my kids still tease me about it a lot. So after that, I entered the sort of the editorial process, the editing shebang, and that went for months and months and months. So you would work on the manuscript, it would go away, then it would come back, and you work on it some more, it would go away, and it would come back. And finally, after all that hard work, during which I got married, so my partner of 8 years then and I got married. So like my wedding was like slotted in between the copy edit phase and the proofread pages, which if anyone's thinking of doing that, I say, don't do it. Don't do it. It was not worth it. But I did have a great wedding, and I'm very glad that I'm married, and I'm also glad I've got a book. So after all that hard work, in March this year, I was in lockdown, as we all were, and I kind of continue to a certain degree to be, thinking that, wow, all this hard work and my book is not going to be printed. They're going to use the paper for toilet paper. And then a box arrived. And this is what happened when I opened the box. So, okay, give me a thumbs up if you can hear the sound. I think it's not.
It's like Back to the Future. Hey George, this just arrived. What is it? It's for you, Mr. McFly. It's for you, Mr. McFly. It's for you. What is it? What is it?
So that is how it is to be almost 50 and to be holding your book for the first time. So a very big feeling. So here we are. The spill. One of the first questions that people like to ask me about the spell is, does it really come with a free cup of tea? And the answer is no. Think about the logistics, people. But after we push past that disappointment, people say, what is it about? So my elevator pitch, which I've been giving a lot lately, and also sort of stipulating that I have never given an actual elevator, and I'm going to have to change that once the world opens up enough. The question and the answer to the question and the elevator pitch is, no two people ever experience or remember the same thing in the same way, especially when they're sisters. So it's about sisters. It's about two sisters who have grown apart, and then in the wake of their mother's death and in uncovering some secrets about their parents' lives, begin to come back to each other. So people then ask, what inspired the book? And the answer is, of course, a lot of things inspire a book. It's like the most complicated recipe that you can ever imagine. So it's really hard to single out one sort of what they call a hero ingredient. But if I had to, it would be the accident that I was in when I was 10. I remember waiting for the ambulance alongside the road and looking back over at the car and thinking, car's fine, we'll be able to drive home in that car. And then later seeing the car and thinking, oh, that car's been totaled. And I was a bit like that car in that accident. Like, I seemed fine on the outside, but actually something fundamentally changed me in that moment, in that accident, that I'm still feeling the impact of that accident some decades later. So it was got me thinking about these moments that in a person's life that, you know, that can really turn a whole life around. And I wanted to explore that. So I kind of put two fictitious sisters in that accident and their mother. And I started wondering, like, where have they come from? Where are they going? You know, why did the accident happen? What happened next? So that was sort of the starting point. So the main themes of the novel are, and there's some handy graphics here, sisters. Yeah, we kind of covered that, but sister relationship, oh my God, such amazing like vein to tap into. So many stories that I've collected over the years, not just from, you know, my own experience of having sisters, but other people's experiences of having sisters. Goodness, such material. Then also memory, this gap that there is between what we experience at the time and then what we remember, what we choose to remember as we kind of twist and bend our memories into sort of to suit the narratives that we tell ourselves about our lives. So I really wanted to kind of explore that gap between those things. And thirdly, and this was not something I set out to do, I ended up by writing one of these characters sort of had an alcohol problem, the mother Tina, and there's this big question about whether or not she was drunk at the time of the accident. I sort of came to explore alcoholism as a theme, but I didn't want to do it in a judgy way, which is like just alcohol's bad, because it's so prevalent in our society, but more look at like all the different kinds of relationships that people have with alcohol. So they're the three themes. And then in terms of the structure, I decided to structure the whole thing like a giant jigsaw puzzle, where I'm handing each piece of the puzzle from different parts of the puzzle to the reader at a time, so that slowly they're able to kind of piece together the larger picture of these two sisters, their lives, like how they've become, who they've become, and where they might go next. So that is how it is structured, and that is the end of my author talk. And look, thank you for having me, Burnside Library, and me hugging a giant penguin. And I think with that, I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much for that, Imbi. And in particular, it was just lovely to see that footage of you opening your box. I mean, for a budding author, and then to actually have that happen must have been a very special moment.
It was amazing. It was amazing, especially I think having had the shadow of like, maybe this won't happen, because a lot of publishers were delaying books, and, you know, they were like looking at their list and saying what should come out, what shouldn't come out. So it was really, I mean, to finally have that thing in my hand. I didn't believe it was actually happening until I was holding that book. So, oh, what a feeling.
Yeah. And then on the 2nd of June, How did you celebrate?
Well, I still worked in the morning. I don't know why, but in retrospect, I shouldn't have, because I was like so skittish. And then at lunchtime, so my kids were still schooling from home, but my son had a class on campus. So we went by our local bookstore, and I sort of, burst in saying, "I'm a writer and that's my book on the shelf." And I had my little packet of pens, and I had a little stamp, and I'm like, "I'm ready to sign." So it wasn't quite like that. They asked me. I did wait to be asked. A bit like a vampire, you've got to invite them into the home. And then I signed everything, and I'm like, run out of books, is there other things I can sign? But it was a really exciting day.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. So just a reminder to our attendees, if you have a question for Imbi at any point, just type it into that little box, or click on the Q&A icon and then type in your questions. So one of our attendees, Melinda, has said, "I love your bookcase in the background." So, yeah, we were chatting about that earlier. It's caused quite a stir on, was it Twitter?
Oh yes, it ended up being picked up by Bookcase Credibility, but yeah, because of my friend Darren, who I inadvertently named the worst character in the book after. He says it wasn't an act of revenge, but anyway, he tagged Bookcase Credibility and they did a huge critique. But actually it wasn't this side, it was the other side. Like, this side would have been fine because it's actually nicely organized, but the other side where the photographer wanted to take my photo, started trying to tidy up. He's like, no, it's fine, it's fine. And then sure enough, the internet sort of went,
"How dare you?"
Yeah.
That's right. So I just want to talk a little bit about the spiel. In a recent interview, you said, "I began to imagine how that accident might change nothing and yet everything all at the same time." So for our viewers, and without giving too much away, can you elaborate a little bit on this idea about changing nothing and yet changing everything, and how do you craft something like that?
Oh, with great difficulty, I think, is the answer. Yeah, so it kind of, that idea of, that memory of the car flipped on its side where everything seemed like it was actually fine and then it wasn't fine. I think, yeah, those moments, those little things, our whole lives are made up with these little moments, these tiny decisions, which can then end up having this huge kind of ramifications on our lives, like turn us around completely. So I remember when I first was writing kind of the synopsis, and I shared it with a friend, and I sort of said, about nobody was particularly hurt in the accident. She said, "Don't you mean that people were hurt in the accident?" I'm like, no. The thing is, like, nothing, the accident itself is actually just a little prang. But for the sisters, it changes so much. For one thing, it actually marks the end of their parents' marriage. And I'm not really giving anything away there, because in the first chapter, you can see the writing on the wall between that couple. The tension is it's pretty tense. So that's kind of what I was interested in writing about.
Excellent, thank you. I have a quick question about the first thing that jumped out at me in the opening chapters is the 1980s references, like Sandboy chips, big hair, West Coast coolers. Is it fun to sort of remember back into that decade? And was most of that from memory, or was some of it from, okay, well, hang on, what were the chips at that time? Do I need to research that? Was there...
Well, the obvious answer is, like, I wasn't alive in the 80s, so what would I know about them? No, I think too, like, I'd written 2 other manuscripts, and one had been set here in West Footscray where I live, and one had been set sort of like Melbourne-ish and then London. And you get to a certain age where you really enjoy thinking back on your past. And it was just so much fun remembering things from my childhood. And what's been a great delight, and something I did not expect, is my school friends, and I moved around a lot, but particularly my school friends from my last 3 years of school in Perth, have gone, like, they've just they've set up a book group on Facebook, and they're like posting about, you know, like there's a reference to the Gobbles nightclub party bus that everyone is just like flipping over, and they've enjoyed it so much.
Thing.
It was an actual thing.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a time in my life where I could not walk through Northbridge, which is where the most sort of pubs and nightclubs are in Perth, without having the Gobbles party bus pulling up alongside me and the doors opening, the driver saying, "Hey girls, want to get on board?" And you think something like that should not pass, you know, it should be remembered. We need to immortalize the Gobbles party bus in writing, and I did that.
That's great. And you've got the support of all your friends that you grew up with as well.
Yeah, they're all delighted.
So a couple of questions from our attendees. Was your beginning short stories, that's how you began writing? And was that how you began writing? And if so, what foundation did this provide to writing a novel?
Well, it's actually an interesting question, because I do get asked that a lot. But it's actually the inverse. I actually wrote 3 manuscripts before I started on short stories. I had written short stories back before I entered the dark ages. During university and also at school, because I had to. And I had come to believe that I couldn't write short stories. I mean, I did blogs, and that's not a short story. It's quite a different form. And I had been writing these long form things and getting nowhere, like absolutely nowhere in getting them published, and just feeling like, why am I doing this? And so writing some short stories was a way of falling in love with writing again, but also maybe getting a few quick wins, sort of like profile building, like getting my name out there. I don't know. But also, you know, because short stories are I think of short stories like being like a sprint, and, you know, long form is more like a marathon. It's just a different kind of race. And I just wanted a couple of things I could finish quickly and get to readers and get that satisfaction and that sort of feedback, rather than sort of just waiting or swilling around in my own words for months and months and months. Yeah, and then I actually got to the point where I'd had so much success with my short stories where I went, oh, maybe I'm meant to be a short story writer, and I'm going to write a short story collection. And that's when I found out I'd been shortlisted for the Penguin Prize. So these manuscripts I'd kind of pushed aside. I went, no, I'm not going to do this anymore, or I'm going to put this on pause. This is too painful. Then suddenly I'm kind of, you know, dusting off my my manuscript of the spill and going, okay, this one might have legs, and then I won.
Yeah, it did have legs, had big legs. Great.
Yeah, it turns out they were hidden under the skirt.
Josie's just said, thank you for sharing your experience. To me, it's quite inspiring, since somehow I felt myself related to your whole story of becoming a writer. So,
oh, thanks, Josie.
Yeah. And Tristan, hi Imbi, it's Tristan.
Hey, Tristan.
How did you start the book? What is your daily writing routine?
Oh, well, firstly, Tristan, I think, is one of 4 sisters, and she is actually joining us from the United States of America. So, you know, like, how did I start the book? Look, I think, you know, I keep describing it as like, you know, the ideas for books come with these like little, like almost like whispers in your ear, like they're just like these unformed shapes and noises around you.
Pieces.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, and then slowly they start to sort of come into being. And in terms of my writing routine, the way I describe it is when I'm entering the world of a new manuscript, it's quite hard to begin with because you don't have that kind of rhythm and momentum. So I set myself a very achievable word count, which is 250 words a day. And I tend to do that first thing in the morning before anyone's awake, pretty much the way I did my blogging. And then there's 2 things there. One is that I'm maintaining daily contact with my stories, so that in all the other things I have to do in the day, and no matter how mundane they are, that story is to like turn around. It's like, you know, it's growing little tendrils. And the other thing is like that sense of achievement, that 250 words, oh, I've achieved something, shut my laptop. That's so important, because otherwise, if I don't have that moment of satisfaction, of achievement, then I hate everybody who is not my manuscript. I hate them. So it's really, really important that I have that little full stop on that and then kind of get on with the rest of my day and then come back to it again the next day and write and write. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I love your passion. That's fantastic. Getting in there and doing it. And then if you don't, it's like, look out, world.
I'm coming for you.
Yeah. So, well, again, this is a question about your passion, I guess, but dotted throughout the novel are these lovely, humorous interactions between family members that I think Australian readers can really relate to. How do you go about crafting these moments? Like, are you a watcher? Do you remember these interactions from your childhood, or you know, with 5 teenagers in the house, is that good enough material for you?
Oh yeah, those teenagers, they provide a wealth of material. I'm going to have to wait. Like, I was thinking about that, you know, that tragedy plus time equals comedy. And I think sort of life plus time equals fiction, because you need to have a little bit of a gap between what you're experiencing and then being able to write about it. But
These characters are fictional.
exactly. Or are they? So I think, yeah, I am an observer, but I'm a collector of stories, and anyone who knows me, and Tristan can certainly attest to this, like, you know, something that I love doing is swapping stories with people. And, you know, I'm always asking, like, oh, how's your mum? What's going on with Aunt Beryl? Like, you know, I keep track of these characters, and even though I know they're real people, but I just love, people are so endlessly fascinating. So yes, I'm kind of a bowerbird of like collecting little shiny blue things, and then, you know, I make a nest out of them.
So in your teenage years, you were journaling about yourself. Now you're journaling about other people.
Yeah, but also about myself. But yeah, sort of, yeah, then I kind of try and de-identify it as much as I can to avoid legal action.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a couple of comments. Imbi, your namesake, Estonian solg, sorry,
yeah,
brooch you're wearing.
You saw it.
She noticed.
Yeah.
From Imbi number 2 and Mariki.
Hello. Thank you for joining. It's just super exciting to have you here on our name day.
Gorgeous. What a coincidence. And Josie, again, I've read too many biographies and stories from writers, for example, Hemingway, Garcia Marquez, and Poe. But this is my first time I actually hear and see an author in the flesh. So she's pretty.
Oh my God, no, I am not like the others.
I just, you know, own it. Come on, Imbi.
I mean, yes, I'm a writer like all the writers. Yeah, they're, it's interesting. Someone was saying earlier to my husband, saying that, you know, writers can be quite recalcitrant or reserved people, because it's like a rich internal life that they lead. But I started off as an actress, like I wanted to be an actress so badly. So for me, that I've never quite kind of lost my acting chops, but, you know, I just a bit more outgoing. But that's not to say I have no trouble talking, but for me, the thing is what happens afterwards, where I go, oh, why did I say that? For example, why did they use the term acting chops? No one knows.
Okay. And I'm going to reflect on this because it's actually Jose, not Josie. So
Jose, hello.
Another question is...
can I just point out, though, when I write the story of Jose's life, I'll call Jose Josie. That's the de-identification. See, that's how it works. That's the magic. Sorry, I interrupted.
It's been inspirational for you tonight. Excellent. Francis has asked, what are the origins of your very unique name?
Well, it is Estonian, and look, now that there's another Imbi in the room, there may be some contention to this story that I've always said, which is it means maiden, or sort of like young girl, and my middle name is Merike. So Imbi Merike is means maiden of the ocean. And then my sister is, my middle sister is Elvie Kirsten, which is Elf of the Cherries. And then my third sister, there is no real meaning to her name, and she carries that resentment. She was born 19 years after me. My dad was spent by then. He was already in his 40s. He was like, I can't think of her name. Like, she's Aime Sasha. And Sasha is a Russian name, and was very contentious with my grandfather, who was quite cross about that. But I have no beef with the Russian people.
What is it like to release a novel out into the world after you've put so much time and effort into each little sentence?
It is really, I've described it as being a bit like an open wound. You feel so exposed, you feel really vulnerable. And I know that Goodreads is a platform for readers. It's not a platform for writers. And people keep telling me that, you know, it's like the ex-boyfriend that you drunk dial when, you know, you shouldn't speak to. But, you know, part of me wants to go in there and go, how can you be so cavalier giving these beautiful books like 1-star reviews? Don't you know how much work, you know, but it is a reader's platform. It's a weird feeling. It's obviously incredibly exciting and sort of humbling to have people respond to your work. This thing that's just kind of lived in you, that you've kind of, these characters that I've lived with, that I've created, that kind of given birth to, and now they're suddenly, people are having their own relationships with them, and there's a certain kind of letting go that you have to do. Like, you have to accept that some people are going to feel very differently about those characters or that story from your original intentions, because that's the reader experience. So yeah, there's a kind of a letting go.
I don't know if I could do it. You just kind of feel very exposed as well, but like you said. But on the other hand, you know, you've won a prize before it's even been released. What has that meant for you, this Penguin Prize?
Well, I was in another talk and I admitted that I was a real girly swot. Like, I would regularly win the class prize or the English prize. And so for me, like, prizes and getting A's has always been very important. And I've really hated adult life because nobody gives you an A. Like, I just want an A. Can someone give me an A? So to get the Penguin Literary Prize was like the A that I've been wanting. It's like A+. But also comes with it's a kind of a double-edged sword, because it's, you know, you're like, oh my God, that's validation. Like, oh, my writing must be worth something. But at the same time, you also thinking, oh, people are going to pick this book up. They're going to see Penguin Literary Prize and they're going to go, that's not literary, or that's, you know, that wasn't worth the prize, rather than just looking at the book as a book. So suddenly it's got this sort of, you know, and I know that people might be drawn to it because it's won this prize. At the same time, I also think that's a standard that they're going to hold it up against. And, you know, I like to think I'm worthy, but, you know, I'm prepared that people might not think I'm worthy. But, you know, I have a crown and I'm going to put my crown on.
I was just thinking, while you had the book in your hand, is there a little section that you would like to read to us? A little taster, perhaps?
A little taste. Okay. So this is just from one of the early chapters. It's just after the funeral of the mum Tina, and the character Nicole is getting a lift from the cemetery back to the wake with her father. When my father saw how wet I was, he jumped out of his Lexus ES 350 and grabbed a towel from the boot. "Thanks, Dad," I said. But the towel wasn't for me, it was for the back seat of his car. Celine was in the passenger seat, busy reapplying her makeup using the rear-view mirror. "Got to get my face back on," she said brightly as I climbed carefully into the back seat. "Where's that lovely Prince Charming of yours?" "Oh, Jethro's gone ahead to deal with the caterers," I said, trying to straighten the towel underneath me. "Oh, he's a keeper, that one. You can thank me at your wedding for getting you two together." I clenched my teeth and smiled politely. Jethro and I had been happily together for 10 years, and yet Celine was still trying to push us down the aisle like it was 1955. "Sure," I said. Even under all that makeup, Celine's face was looking pale and puffy in the reflection of the rearview mirror. I remembered Samantha's theory that Celine was trying to get pregnant. Maybe she was right, after all. Finished, Celine announced, swinging the mirror back around to face the driver's side. Dad immediately readjusted it and then moved on to fussing with the power-winged mirrors. We were never going to leave at this rate. I had an urge to shake myself off like a dog over Dad's precious upholstery. Was that Meg I saw at the funeral? Dad asked, as he continued to fiddle with even more mirror-related knobs. Yeah, I said. I haven't seen her in more than 30 years. Who's Meg? Celine asked, now brushing her hair in long, decisive strokes. Tina's sister, Dad replied. Was she the one doing the ugly crying? You know, the one that looked like Tina, but much younger? There's only 2 years between them, would you believe? Really? Meg must have a great skincare routine. Not to mention a fully functioning liver, I piped up, and then immediately regretted it. It felt far too soon to be making light of Mum's drinking. I thought it was good of Aunt Meg to come. To tell the truth, I'd been surprised she'd flown over from Melbourne for the funeral. She'd barely seen Mum over the past 3 decades. But then I knew from my own experience that sisters were sisters, no matter the time or distance. She had as much of a right to grieve as any of us. I'm so sorry for your loss, Celine said. She'd now turned in her seat to give me her full attention. Of course, I only met Tina a few times, but I do know this, she loved you and Samantha very much. It wasn't much consolation being told by my father's third wife that my dead mother loved me, especially when accompanied by the whir of the power-winged mirrors, but I knew Celine meant well. She wasn't the easiest person to know, I admitted. I could see the back of my father's head nod slightly, perhaps in agreement, or maybe he was still looking at the bloody wing mirrors. Oh.
Hey. That sets up the relationship, you know, that tense relationship between the stepmother and the daughters, and yeah. But there's so many just lovely family moments, and the dialogue with the banter is so cleverly written. So yeah, I'm sure our readers out there are going to really, really enjoy this. In fact, I'm getting lots of questions about that. One of which is, where can we get a copy of your book?
Okay, well, you can obviously borrow it from Burnside Library. Hopefully there's a copy there. It's available from, I would recommend, if you're in Australia, please buy it from your local independent bookseller, because they really need your business. And it's also available online, Booktopia, although I think they might be sold out. The Book Depository also sold out, but if you get your name on the wait list, because I've got I basically move school and change job and country every 2 years. So I've just got people all over the world who excited about the fact that I've done something with my life. So so that's the Book Depository is for overseas people. But yeah, it's available through most, good bookshops. And if it's not, ask them to order it in. Tell them it's really great. Also, you've heard maybe from the author itself. No, actually, don't mention that the author said it was really great, because that sounds not so good.
Jose's actually asking, any chance of a public reading at Burnside Library after COVID?
Oh, I hope. Wouldn't that be fun? Well, if I come that way, I definitely will drop by.
That'd be lovely. Thank you. If we're allowed to cross the
borders.
Yeah, eventually. So just before I ask Imbi another question, again, I invite you all to type in any questions you have for her in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So just let your mouse hover over it and it will pop up. In a previous interview, you said that you have a character that's been clamoring to be written for quite some time. So I'm asking about your next project, but I'm also asking about this character, if you're willing to share.
Well, it's interesting, because I was thinking a lot about her this morning. So a lot of people people who've known me for many years, I have a lot of sound sensitivities. I have, I'm going to get the word wrong now, misophonia, which is basically, it's not, it can be lots of different sounds, but for me, it really is about eating sounds. I have a lot of trouble hearing people eat, like to the point where I feel absolutely murderous. So I've never read a book with a character who has misophonia, and so I've been really interested in writing a character who has this, and I'm quite excited about it. Of course, you know, me being me, you know, there's sadness in this character's life. She's lost a husband and a son in a plane accident, and Tristan will love this. The plane accident happened in Japan, but, you know, she finds a way of being able to go to Japan to kind of honor their memory. So that's kind of the idea. But there's something about postcards in there that's really complicated to explain, and I worry that it may be too complicated to write. But that's future Imbi's problem. For the moment, let's just say that, like, it's going to be a winner.
Okay, so you've definitely got a project on the go.
I do.
Yep, and that's all we're going to hear about that, I think. Keep it under wraps until we're ready to find out some more.
There's probably more than I've actually said about that project ever. Like, it's really just been in my head. So now I'm feeling that kind of, you know, when you tell people what you're going to call your baby, you know, and people are like, oh no, that's a terrible, oh, I went to school with someone called that. So now I'm feeling regret. This is one of the things I'll regret later.
We don't regret it, do we?
Okay.
That's great. Okay, so thank you so much, Imbi, for joining us today. In particular, I just want to stress how lovely it was to see you opening that box of your newly published book. That must have been really, really special. And, you know, we'd be so happy for all South Australians and Americans who are joining us tonight to get behind Imbi, and also at the same time supporting our local bookshops in South Australia. So thank you very much.
And I've realised that I have the power to end this thing, don't I?
I've just got to say one more thing before you
okay. I won't do it before you finished. All right.
Thank you. Everybody who's watching tonight, please follow Burnside Library on Facebook and Instagram, and keep checking our website for upcoming events. On Tuesday evening, we'll be chatting with Adelaide author Sonia Bates about her historical fiction novel Inheritance of Secrets. So that's on Tuesday night coming up. And thank you all so much for zooming into our webinar today, and I hope to see you again soon for future online events at Burnside Library. Thanks again, Imbi, and I hope you enjoyed tonight.
Thanks so much for having me, Burnside Library, and Kate, I really appreciate it. And now have I got permission to press the button?
Yeah, and thank you. It's been really lovely to talk to you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All the best. Bye.